I'm Ian Kronjager. I live in Botanic Ridge and I'm a carer for Barbara Kronjager, who's got scleroderma. So for the first 16 years or so, my wife has had scleroderma. It wasn't too bad. We could manage a lot. We could still go out, take the caravan out and whatever. But the last 2 years where it became more difficult and she was looking at a lung transplant, things started to get a lot more difficult. And I had to pick up a lot of the tasks around the house, the garden, had to maintain all of that. A lot of the driving, in fact all of the driving in the end. Shopping, simple things like shopping, clothes shopping. And Barbara was bound to a wheelchair in the last 2 years. So it's pretty difficult. People don't sort of realise that if I have to take Barbara out in a wheelchair, go shopping, how do you push a trolley along, for instance, you know? That's a very difficult thing. So what you'd have to do is go down to the shopping centre quite often and buy small amounts, maybe half a dozen items, and then you'd have to come back the next day and do the same thing. And this went on for quite a long time, so it was quite difficult. So that was one of the issues. But of course, you know, there's also the dependency on you financially, and you have to weigh up at what point you have to go onto a disability payment. And at that stage you're probably still working, and the government only allows you 25 hours a week, including your travel time, to as a maximum limit per week to qualify for the disability pension. So that became a bit tricky. And so for the first year or so, we managed on that, and you have to keep very good records and what have you. Then it got to the point where I had to decide to stop work altogether and look after Barbara full time. And of course, that's a bit of a battle in your own mind, because you're thinking about the financial side and keeping everything running in the household and doing everything, buying your clothes, buying your food, and etc. So yeah, it did actually become quite tricky at that point to know when to actually go over to a full-time disability payment. I was working the 3 days a week initially, but when it got to the point where Barbara just couldn't look after herself and had to be watched more closely, I had to decide at what point to actually stop work, which was quite difficult because obviously, you know, you're thinking about, well, how do I get back into the workforce again, and well, you know, sort of you're getting on towards 60 years of age and what have you, and you know that it becomes more difficult to get back into the workforce. So I did make the decision in the end, because there was no alternative, and I stopped work. And then you're fully dependent on the disability payments to see you through. And so on the other side of that coin is, now that Barbara's had her lung transplant, and after her rehabilitation and what have you, you have the decision once again now to try and find employment and go back to work. So obviously you've got to look at that point at where do I come off the disability payment, and you've got to try and have a job teed up at the same time. So yeah, it is tricky. It is a bit of an emotional roller coaster, the whole journey, if you want to call it that. And there are a lot of times where you'd like to go and do things, as you do. You want to go out with friends, you want to take the caravan out, you want to go on a bit of a holiday, but you can't do any of that because one thing is, like being on a lung transplant list, you're not allowed to be more than an hour from Melbourne. So you're really confined as to where you can go. You have to find somewhere local to visit, and in the end you had to basically say, well, I can't even do that anymore, because things were really getting tricky with Barbara's health, her breathing. Even the slightest change in temperature would set her off coughing, and of course you get a lot of mucus and what have you. So she was very sick in the end, but of course, you know, it affects not just me, but your partner as far as mentally. But I guess for me it wasn't my focus all the way through, was my mental issues or what have you, or how difficult it was for me. But when you see somebody going through it, when somebody needs a lung transplant and how bad they are, you soon think, oh, don't worry about that, I've got nothing to think about compared to my partner, you know, and you just get on with it. Towards the end, before the lung transplant, I mean, what was really hard, and you can see the downward spiral. And when your partner says to you, I just want to finish, that was that. Yeah, I knew there was only 2 weeks, it was 2 weeks or a month at the most to go. So that was the total trend downward, and you could see daily the regression. You could see it, but then you've got to keep strong and not show that, because you don't want your partner to freak out. But I never gave up. I never gave up on that phone call, and it came through.